Hello, everyone. I'm Kaylin Walls, and I'm the Vice President of the Louisville Forum. Welcome to our April 2024 program. The Louisville Forum programs typically occur on the second Wednesday of every month. We're a little off schedule this month, and we host those here typically at Vincenzo's. Founded in 1984, the Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan, nonprofit public issues group. We host debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial issues that affect the greater Louisville community. For more information about the Louisville Forum, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Now on to today's program, Affordable Housing in Louisville. In February 2019, Louisville Metro's first housing needs assessment was released. This assessment was a comprehensive report which provides the city with an in-depth analysis of housing stock across Louisville Metro. The Housing Needs Assessment was commissioned by Louisville Metro's Office of Housing and Community Development and the Louisville Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The assessment was set to be updated every 5 years and right on schedule. The first update was just released in March of 2024. According to the updated March report, Louisville housing shortage is actually getting worse. The city is now roughly 36,000 units short of available affordable housing necessary to meet the needs of our city, an increase of about 5,000 units since the 2019 assessment. Last year, Mayor Craig Greenberg made the housing shortage in Louisville a centerpiece of his campaign and promised to build or preserve 15,000 homes in his first term. So consistent with the Louisville Forum's mission, a topic that's local and contemporary and complex, we're lucky to have none other than Mayor Craig Greenberg here with us today to discuss the March report and his plan to address affordable housing needs in Louisville. Mayor Greenberg is joined today by Elizabeth Strojan, the Executive Director of Louisville Metro Housing Authority. Please join me in welcoming both Mayor Greenberg and Elizabeth. Yeah, so Mayor Greenberg, if you would, just take a couple minutes and tell us about your plans for affordable housing.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for having both Elizabeth and me here with you today. It's always wonderful to be with the Louisville Forum, and thank you all so much for the constructive dialogue that you all foster and facilitate month after month in our city. It is such an important example for how we should all collaborate with one another, talk about difficult topics, and work to get towards solutions that support and improve our entire city. We want to focus as much time on questions. So just very briefly, I will talk about why affordable housing is so important to my administration and me and why it is such a priority. In my view, housing is the foundation for everyone. It's the foundation for families. It's the foundation for everything else that we do in life. Having an affordable place to live, but also a safe and quality place to live is necessary for everything else that we do. And unfortunately, about a quarter of the people in our city right now spend more than 30% of their monthly income on housing, whether that's a mortgage payment and rent and utilities and things, or whether that's rent, more than 30%. Our goal is that no one in our city should have to pay more than 30% of their income on their housing needs so that they can use all of the rest of their income for everything else in their life. We have a long way to go to make that happen. And that's why, as you heard, my administration came out with the My Louisville Home Plan last year with great input from across the entire city with a big, bold goal. I think most people here know me well enough to know incremental improvement is not my style. We are going for big, bold goals because that's what we need to address this issue, to build or renovate 15,000 new affordable housing units across our city. So what does that mean? That means everything. We need more affordable housing in every neighborhood, not just in other people's neighborhood. And for far too long, that has been the approach of our city, not just in Louisville, but everywhere. Everybody says they're for affordable housing, but then don't want change in their backyard. If we all take that approach, we will never solve this problem. So we have to do more, we have to work together, and we have to think as one city. We need more of all types of housing. We need more affordable for sale housing. We need more affordable rental units. We need more duplexes and triplexes and cottage courts. We need more of everything because the world is changing, and the type of housing that many of us grew up in, there are so many more options now. And young people in particular, families as they grow, as they want to live together in new ways that they haven't before, are demanding different types of housing. And so we as a city need to support the private sector, nonprofit organizations, for-profit developers, Agencies like Louisville Metro Housing Authority, we have to make it easier to build more housing all across our entire city if we want to grow. If we want to have a city that's going to have money to invest in everything else we care about, like parks and libraries and public safety, and the list goes on, we have to continue to grow. It's also key to solving our homeless crisis. We need more housing units so that people who are currently living on the streets or don't have a place to call home have somewhere to go. We've got great partners in our city, like Volunteers of America. I see Jennifer's with us here today, that is doing so much already in this area, and we need to continue to support it. And I'm looking forward to talking more about that. We also need to work more with our state. Jennifer, myself, many others were working in Frankfurt this year to try to get the state more involved in supporting affordable housing needs of Louisville, of Lexington, of every city, town, and county in this entire state. And while we might not have made a ton of obvious progress in the last session, I think we set the stage for progress in future sessions, because I think the state realizes too, and the General Assembly realizes, that this is an issue that needs their support from the state with their regulatory authorities and support with their ability to provide tax credits and with straight up cash to help support projects that are necessary. So these are some things that I hope we get into more. I'm now going to turn it over to an amazing person, someone who we are so fortunate to have back in our city. She is a graduate of DuPont Manual High School. She was
Math, science, technology. Anybody in MST here? All right.
And Elizabeth, for many years after going to Center College, was in New York, where she was helping to lead the largest affordable housing finance authority in the entire country. Fortunately, we were able to lure her and her family back home, and we are now so honored to have a new executive director of Louisville Metro Housing Authority that is addressing the giant challenges that LMHA has and is facing them with honesty, with transparency, and a determination to do things differently and better for the 15,000 residents that rely on LMHA in some way, shape, or form. We can and we must do better. When the city or a city agency is the owner of housing units, they should be the best. Right now, that is not the case. But I'm so thrilled that Elizabeth is the executive director of LMHA that is going to help lead the way forward. Elizabeth?
Hi. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And my mother thanks you for bringing me home to Louisville. I'm sure you. But whenever people say, like, oh, we're so glad you're back, we're so happy to have you here, I am so grateful to be here. I am so glad to be home in Louisville. And now that I'm back and working and getting to meet all kinds of people and work through very complex problems, I'm realizing that a lot of the things that made me a success in New York City are just part of being a Louisvillian. It's how we approach things. It's not except for the where did you go to high school question. It's really not about where you're from. It's about we're at point A, we got to get to point B, and we have to figure out how to do it. So what's our next step? So they used to make fun of me in my old job that I'm a next step person. Like, what's our next step? Okay, what are we doing about it? Okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix it? And I feel like that's a Louisville approach. So I'm so happy to be here, and I wouldn't want to do this job anywhere else, I promise you. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what LMHA is, what we do, where we are, and where we need to go. The Louisville Metro Housing Authority, the authority structure is always quite complicated. We are federally funded, and anytime you get money from anybody, whether it's an allowance from your parents or a grant from the federal government, when you get money from somebody, it comes with a lot of strings attached. So 90% of our money and like 1,000% of our rules come from the federal government, from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We are state chartered. There's a state statute that allows us to exist. And we are locally accountable. So I'm appointed by the mayor, as is our board. So when you have structures like that, it's very complicated. I always like to say I have a lot of bosses. I have a lot of people that I'm accountable to, the mayor, HUD, our residents, our board. You have to have good government, and you have to have good governance. And that's something that LMHA has slipped on in the last few years. And I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on the past, but let me tell you where we are. We do 4 major things at LMHA. We own and operate public housing. So that's not just Dosker Manor, but it certainly includes Dosker Manor and other sites that I would certainly consider troubled, Avenue Plaza, Parkway Place, But we have 36 developments throughout the county that we own and operate, and most of them you wouldn't even notice. I actually grew up across the street from the Whips Mill houses, and I had no idea that it was public housing. I know now, and it's doing great. But that's what we do. We own and operate that public housing. We also are partners with the private sector on mixed finance sites. So those are sites like Park Duval, Liberty Green, Beecher Terrace, and Shepherd Square. Just because we've worked with private partners doesn't mean that we can wash our hands of that. We have to make sure that we're providing proper oversight of those developments. Those were our residents. A lot of our financing is in there. We signed a lot of documents to make those projects happen. We have to do a better job overseeing those. We also have the largest Section 8 program in the state of Kentucky. So that's a big way that we're serving folks, is that we give vouchers to people to find apartments in the private market. Those can, from time to time, be project-based to help finance the ongoing operations of developments. So we're helping to build new housing supply. And the fourth thing that we do is we provide what we call special programs, which is essentially financial empowerment tools for people who are ready and able to move up, out, and off of assistance. That's not everybody. We serve folks who are probably always going to need our assistance, and that's okay. But we want to make sure for the people who want to move on, we're helping them get the tools they need to do it. So all of those things that we do need to be fixed, need to be bolstered, and need to be put into overdrive. It is not acceptable that Dosker Manor exists in a city like Louisville, where we have so many partners and so many resources, and we are working as fast as we can to bring better options to people in Dosker Manor. It's not acceptable that our Section 8 department, frankly, is out of compliance, and that impacts the landlords that we work with, and it impacts the tenants that we serve. So we are working hard to get an audit of that program to make sure we're back in compliance, that we're answering the phones when people need answers. Our special programs is doing great. Yeah, we're doing great on that. And as I mentioned, we need better oversight of our mixed finance. So I like to say that we need a year at LMHA to truly stabilize, to identify the needs. We are staffing up like crazy. That's probably my biggest success in my 90 days. I hit 90 days because I had to change my email passwords. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's been 3 months. So we are hiring great people from all over the country to come in and help us get things under control and turn it into overdrive. Once we're stabilized, we are going to be the best partner to work with in the city of Louisville. Landlords are going to be banging down our doors to get our vouchers because our program is so easy to work with, and it's guaranteed income every single month, no matter what the tenant can or can't do. We are going to be a development partner. We own land and properties all over the city that can be, redeveloped to higher and better use, and we will get there. So that's my long-term vision, is that everybody's banging down our door to work with us. Okay.
Sounds great.
Okay.
And I know that we have lots of questions from our audience. Quick reminder, fill out those question cards and hold them up, and our board members will collect those. And we'll go ahead and get started with the Q&A portion. Lawrence, if you would.
Thanks, both of you, for coming, by the way. Mayor, you touched on this, but I want to define our terms. When you say affordable housing, what exactly do you mean?
That's a great question. I think it means a lot of different things to different people. We are trying to work so that no one in Louisville has to pay more than 30% of their monthly income towards their housing needs. So that's on a per person basis. Obviously, people are at all different income levels, from zero to a lot of money. We're really focused on those lowest earning families, but this is impacting the middle class as well. It's impacting everyone, but that's how I define it, is that no one should have to pay more than 30% of their income on a monthly basis towards their housing needs.
Can I talk about that too? Would that be okay? When I think about affordable housing, or just housing in general, it's a huge spectrum. Everything from people who have zero income and are going to need permanent rental assistance probably for the rest of their life, all the way up to the highest earning folks who might be assisted through the mortgage interest deduction or a 30-year secured mortgage, for example. But what happens when all the different parts of the housing market are working well is that LMHA's job is very easy. What happens when the other parts of the housing market kind of break down or aren't producing enough, we become the housing of last resort, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. So here in Louisville, as the mayor said, I think his plan is brilliant. because it's very broad and it's focusing on the people who need it the most, but you have to focus on every aspect, because if anything's broken, it's all broken. So here in Louisville, when I look around and I look at the residents that we're serving, I think that we need a lot more permanent supportive housing in this city. We need housing for people who need rental assistance and they need additional supportive services. And the great news is we have excellent partners to be able to do it. We need, housing so that people don't move away from Louisville because they're like, I just graduated college. I want to get a good job and be able to afford to live here. We need it all. But my plea to everyone, when the mayor is saying we all need to be welcoming housing into our neighborhood, please do it for me. Make my job easier. That's my pitch.
Lourdes?
Well, I'm combining a couple of questions here, but both of them had to do with the recently passed legislation in Frankfurt, House Bill 388, and specifically the one-year moratorium, and how that will impact the progress on our land development code and affordable housing.
The question was about, in the last legislative session, there was a bill that passed called House Bill 388. It had a lot of provisions that were just related to Jefferson County. One of those provisions put a moratorium on our city government, Metro Council, from making any changes to the land development code, changing the definition of residential zoning in our land development code for a year. So the question was about what are our thoughts about that moratorium and what's the impact of that? Well, first, let me say, we're not stopping. We're continuing to move forward because we have to. We can't just wait a year until this moratorium ends and then start dealing with the issue. So right now, Metro Council just created an ad hoc committee on housing that's looking at our entire zoning code for what we need to do as a city to help make it easier to develop more housing at all income levels across the city. For example, my view is that, and I think many people share this view, is that happening in other cities, that along our major thoroughfares in the city, Dixie Highway, Taylorsville Road, Barstown Road, Poplar Level, Preston, Broadway, Shelbyville Road, we should make it very easy as of right to build dense housing, that we should want density along our main thoroughfares, and then we need an improved public transportation system that also adds to that as well. And then as you get further away from the main thoroughfares, there may be less density. However, take a neighborhood like the Highlands or Old Louisville. You have multi-million-dollar homes right next to a duplex or a fourplex. Some of our most vibrant and authentic neighborhoods in our entire city have all sorts of different types of housing unit working together well and creating the vibrancy and the greatness of these neighborhoods. These days, the fancy term for that is called middle housing, something that many cities are adopting and that we are looking at right now. And what that means is that if your property is zoned for single family, that you would also be able to develop a duplex or a triplex on that same piece of property, so long as it complies with the same architectural feel. It can't be more than 2 or 2.5 stories like the other single family homes. There are size requirements and things like that. We're not talking about massive dense development in a single family residential neighborhood, but there could be a duplex, just like in some of these other great neighborhoods. That would be a zoning change that we need to make to our zoning code. Right now, under the state law, we can't make that change until April. We are working to get as many of those changes made as we think our city needs right now, that we will be ready to make. At the same time, we hear loud and clear this legislation. And we hear loud and clear what some of the members of the General Assembly are telling us by passing this legislation and what we're hearing from other members of our community. And that's two things. One is there are some members of our community that don't seem to want any sort of change from what their neighborhood is like right now. And that's tough to deal with. If we're going to grow as a city, we all need to be open-minded to change. Now, there might be some ways that we support different types of change in different neighborhoods, and there are some parts of our county where we want to preserve the great natural beauty of those parts of our county, whereas that might be less important in others where they're already dense. But the other thing that we're hearing from the General Assembly and our constituents is that people want a voice in the process. And so we hear that loud and clear. And so at the same time, we're working on ways that we can propose amendments to our zoning and our planning process so that people feel like their voice is heard and that there's a clear process that people understand where there are opportunities to participate and how we're going to go about planning and zoning as we move forward.
This next question, Mayor, actually touches on something you just mentioned about the term affordable housing and how it has a negative connotation to many who don't want it in their neighborhoods. How do you propose to overcome that resistance and help people see how affordable to others does not mean it leads to things like lower property values, disrepair, or increase in crime?
That is a huge challenge. We need someone creative in this room or somewhere else maybe to just, in my mind, it's just housing. It's, I mean, many of us in this room, if not all of us, probably, might live in housing that we consider affordable for ourselves. It's just housing. When you look at what is termed an affordable housing apartment right now compared to another one, you would not know the difference. I'll tell you a true story from the campaign. Just about a year and a half ago, I was going to meet HPI, Housing Partnership, that does some great work in our city in all sorts of different affordable housing initiatives. Out in the East End in Middletown, they have a relatively brand new apartment complex, probably 300 apartments. I had the address, I knew where I was going, and I got there and couldn't find Andrew, who I was scheduled to meet. Well, it turns out I was in the apartment complex across the street. Literally, to me, they looked exactly the same, but one was affordable and the other was market rate. The only difference is that Andrew's, HPI's affordable housing apartment building had subsidies from the federal government so that individuals who lived there paid less per month. It was the same quality. And I told Andrew this story. I mean, it was virtually the identical apartment. Just one is being subsidized so that teachers and police officers and other individuals who are not at the high end of the earning spectrum can afford a place to live. It is simply housing. People, there are codes in place. I think it's a misnomer right now that poor quality housing is being built. Now, we need to ensure that once housing is built, or if it's been around for 30 years, that it stays up to snuff and that we maintain the quality. And we just announced earlier this week when Brandon was on Metro Council, he and his colleagues passed something called the rental registry, which now requires all owners of rental property to register their properties so we can ensure that everyone who is renting property to others in this community maintain their property to a certain level. That's important. Quality is important as well. But new housing that's being built is of good quality these days. Candidly, it's usually an excuse because people don't want they think a different type of person than themselves is going to move into the neighborhood. We've got to overcome that. This is 2024, guys. One of the great things about our city is being diverse, is being inclusive, is being welcoming, is meeting people who come from different backgrounds than us. We need to welcome this and support this.
I have a question about Dosker Manor, and what is the status of improvements and or replacement of those buildings? And then what are the challenges to the timeline? Because there seems to be a sense that the improvements should have been seen sooner rather than now, rather than what it is. What are the challenges to that timeline? And finally, the programs and processes that created what we have right now with Dosker Manor, what accountability has there been to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I could talk about this all day, so somebody just pull me off stage when it's time. But my sense of what has happened at Dosker Manor is it was built with Section 9 public housing funding. And when something is funded that way from the federal government, there are a lot of rules about what you can use that money for and what money can come in. So once something is built under that program, and frankly, things aren't being built under that program anymore because Congress was very clear, we're not funding this anymore. So Dosker Manor was built with Section 9 funding, public housing capital and operating, and that ever shrinking pot of money from the federal government was what we had to keep that building up. And when you hit a certain point in the home that you might own, when you need a new roof, you need a water heater, you need something like that, you either have the money to do it or you're able to borrow the money to do it for like a home improvement loan, or you might call your aunt or your uncle and beg people to give you money to fix your hot water heater. You can't do that with that kind of property. You have to reposition the property into a different HUD program. We are not going to be able to, we cannot keep Dosker Manor up with the Section 9 funding. I really, really wish that LMHA had repositioned that property through a different HUD program many years ago. It didn't happen. So now we are where we are. In addition to the buildings just getting worse and worse and not having the huge influx of money that was needed to fix the physical conditions in the property, the population at Dosker Manor has also changed. It was built for seniors. It was built as senior housing. And several years ago, HUD said, you can't just have a senior designation, you need to take people with disabilities of all ages, because we didn't have enough of that housing in the city of Louisville. So LMHA began accepting people with disabilities of all ages. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody needs a home. That's fine. But what LMHA did not do was provide services appropriate for the changing population. A few years ago, in response to the incredible homelessness crisis and in response to COVID, LMHA instituted a homelessness preference across its portfolio, which included Dosker Manor. So the folks that we have living in Dosker Manor, in addition to those physical conditions, we have some of the most vulnerable people in the city of Louisville living in that housing. So it's I like to say, I don't like to say, but the truth is, I've seen physical conditions that are worse than Dosker Manor, but I've never seen anything like Dosker Manor when you think about the intersection of those physical conditions and the extremely vulnerable population that lives there.
And the lack of supportive services.
And the lack of supportive services. So I don't have 5 years to apply for a planning grant from HUD and get everything perfect, and then apply for another grant from HUD for several years after that and fix things up. We have to do things right now. So what we're doing right now is we are trying to stabilize that property. So we are doing everything we can on the safety and security front to stop people coming into the buildings who shouldn't be in the buildings. And it's very difficult because of how the buildings were built. It's the biggest building there is like a motel. So once you kind of get into an exterior stairwell, you can get onto any floor and you can get into any unit. That's an extremely vulnerable position for that extremely vulnerable population to be in. So we are doing everything we can to shore up safety and security. The mayor mentioned the lack of social services. We are partnering with the Office of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods to bring in more social workers onto the property. Because we all need help. We all need services. I moved home because I needed more help than I was getting in New York City. I'm not saying anything bad about people that need services. We all need it. And some people, if you can't get it from your family or you can't pay for it, we need to provide the social workers to help people get it. We are increasing our maintenance staff there so that we can keep up with the conditions and the emergency kind of repairs. But what we cannot do is truly fix those buildings as they stand right now with the resources that we have right now. So we are working on all fronts to figure out how do we stabilize the property, because even if I snap my fingers and said, let's get everybody out and tear the buildings down and rebuild something, that's gonna take time. So we have to stabilize things right now. We are looking for the best housing possibilities for folks that are in there while we do the long-term planning. But LMHA owns the site, we control the site, and we will in perpetuity. The plan is to do that. So that's what I can say. Did that answer some of your questions? What would you?
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is that Elizabeth, I think, is rightfully being careful to not get ahead of the residents.
That's right.
And under her new leadership, there's great engagement, far more than before, to engage the residents, to hear from them, to understand who wants to leave, who wants to stay, who wants, if they leave, do they want to come back, what do they need? And before any decisions are made, they should be the first ones to know as well. But I can assure you that Elizabeth and her team are spending a significant amount of their time right now on both these short-term urgent fixes that are needing, as well as a long-term strategy to do right by all the residents of Dosker Manor.
Thank you for that. That's good.
Question, can we turn unused office space into housing such as
Yes.
Cincinnati is doing?
We have to. We've got to be real about where we are as a downtown and as a world. Our world operates very differently than it did before COVID. And so we've got, in Louisville, one of the great things about our downtown is these wonderful historic buildings that we have. Buildings like the Landmark Building, the Hayburn Building, the Kentucky Home Life Building, the Starks Building, the list goes on and on. These are great buildings that, unless something drastically changed again for at least the next decade, if not the next couple of decades, will never be filled by office workers again. We have to do something different. And Two of the best options are housing or hospitality, some type of hotels or other places to stay. And so we are very focused on that. Many of them are, if not all of them, are eligible for the state and federal historic tax credit. That's great. But given the high cost of construction these days and the still relatively low cost of housing compared to other major cities, that doesn't always get financing all of the way. And so one of the things that I'm very proud the state just supported, which I hope they support more over the coming years, is with their record historic $100 million investment in downtown Louisville. One of the 6 eligible uses for those funds is to help convert vacant office buildings into vibrant new uses. Housing would be an amazing way to do just that.
Please detail special projects that you had mentioned, and also, are the apartments, patio homes, townhouses being built across from Ballard part of these special projects?
Those are market rate housings on her lane there. Those are market rate housing.
What
was the first part of the question?
Special projects.
You're talking about the special programs that I mentioned?
Yes,
I believe
yes.
so.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yes. I hope so. It says project, but we'll go with the programs.
Okay, great. I'm happy to answer that. So we get grants from the federal government through programs called Family Self-Sufficiency and Resident Opportunity for Self-Sufficiency, FSS and ROS. We like to use more acronyms in public housing than even the regular affordable housing world. But what that allows us to do is to provide opportunities for residents to take financial empowerment classes. We can do special things like if you are enrolled in the program, you say, I'm raising my hand, I want to improve my financial situation, I want to eventually become a homeowner, or these are my goals. We have social workers who work with people to help set those goals and help meet those goals. And then we can do things, we have the flexibility through our a special designation that we received from HUD in the 1900s called Moving to Work. We can do things like if your income goes up, we are not going to raise your rent. We're going to put that difference in your increase in income and what we would otherwise charge you in rent into an escrow account. We're going to add to it ourselves. When you graduate the program, you get a big chunk of change that's going to help you further your goals. So those are the kinds of things that we do. We also do things like broadband access. I mean, can you imagine getting through COVID, making everything virtual, and then you don't have access to the internet? So we were able to take advantage of federal programs to make sure that all of our seniors and our family sites had affordable access to the internet. We connect people. We like to be connectors. We can't do it all. We're not a social service agency. We're not a medical service provider. We're not an affordable food provider, but we partner with agencies like Dare to Care to make sure that we're having food available to our residents. You know, we put a lot of calls into Kroger Mobile so that Kroger can come out and sell things that are a reasonable price to our residents. So those are the kinds of things we do. Our bread and butter in special programs is self-sufficiency and financial empowerment, but we really try to partner as much as we can to bring things to folks. We just don't, just like everywhere, we don't have enough of it.
One other city program, that special city program that we're working on right now that I'm very excited about, is one of our challenges is we have far too many vacant and abandoned properties across our city, particularly in lower income neighborhoods. And that has a devastating negative impact on those neighborhoods. It brings those neighborhoods down. It doesn't create a sense of safety. It's just not conducive to a vibrant, bright life and outlook. We need to convert those vacant and abandoned properties into new homes, where people are proud of the home that they live in, that they own, that they rent, whatever it might be, but that those are improved. Well, one of the challenges right now, and just to give you a scope, I mean, there are probably 5,000. I'm a little bit making up that number, but that's an estimate. The city owns about 500 vacant and abandoned properties. There are about another 1,500 properties that we take care of, even though we don't own, and that's not all of them by far. One of the impediments to turning vacant and abandoned properties into a new home for someone else is that there are often liens on those properties, that the previous homeowner didn't take care of the home. They got cited before they just totally abandoned it. And so maybe a property has $20,000, $30,000 of liens because of accumulated interest. That property is never going to sell if there's an additional $30,000 to buy a home that does not have much value already. So our view, and what the city's working on right now that we hope to release very soon, is a program where we are going to waive those liens. If you're willing to buy that home and either fix it up and sell it to an income eligible individual or rent it to an income eligible individual for a certain period of time, we will simply waive those fees. City's never going to otherwise collect that money anyway. So let's do the right thing. Let's convert that vacant and abandoned property into a bright new home for a new family. And so we're excited about that program.
Very clear.
And there's a question about that, Mayor. How are you pushing developers to build on empty lots in existing neighborhoods instead of destroying acres of green space?
Yeah, that's one of the ways that we're doing that. Certainly, we have one of the other things that we're doing is in our downtown, for example. We have more than enough surface parking lots in downtown Louisville. And as time goes on and people continue to, as our public transportation improves, as people continue to rely more on Uber and Lyft and scooters and walking and bikes and living nearby and everything else, will need even less, is my guess, even as we grow. And so one of the things that we did last year is that we put out an RFP for 3 city properties that are currently not in use. There's a property just east of 9th Street, just west of the courthouse, the old Museum Plaza site, that I tried to develop 15 years ago and didn't happen. And then right next to Metro Hall and right just north of City Hall, there's a big parking lot where the old LMPD headquarters used to be, and that old fiscal court building that's now mostly vacant. And we now have letters of intent with 3 local development companies that are working to transform parking lots into mixed-use neighborhoods. That's what we need in downtown Louisville. We need to turn our vacant asphalt, which is horrible for our heat island, does nothing to generate property taxes and support our city, does nothing to create vibrant, safe, clean, green downtown neighborhood that we all want, and turn those into vibrant mixed-use neighborhoods. I'm very hopeful that at least some of them will have affordable housing as a significant component of them.
What is your reaction to the legislation that passed that would allow landlords to take into account Section 8 housing on renters, whether to rent to them or not?
I think it's bad. I think that, again, as Elizabeth said, if you have a Section 8 housing voucher, that should be like cash. We shouldn't be discriminating against people. Everybody needs a safe, quality, and affordable place to call home. And I think we should do everything we can to support the individuals in our society that are most in need, and we should be doing more to support them, not make it more difficult than their life already is.
But since the bill has passed, what now?
I can talk about that, if that's okay.
Of course.
So I can't change the bill. I did stand with the governor as he vetoed it before the veto was overridden. I wish I could change it because I think it's bad policy on a variety of levels, including not letting Louisville govern itself. But delete that footage. I'm getting off task. But I don't know yet what the impact is going to be. We're not yet seeing landlords kicking people out. We're not seeing that happen. I firmly believe that most landlords in the city of Louisville want to help be a part of the solution. So what I can control and what we are working on is becoming such a great Section 8 program that, like I said, people are knocking down our doors to take our vouchers. So that is what we can do, and that's what we will do. It's guaranteed income. It's a great program. Most tenants, just like all of us, are just trying to live their lives. There's no reason not to take it. So I can't make you take it, but I can make you want to take it.
And we need more vouchers in our city. Elizabeth and I were just meeting with some folks from HUD last week and talking about programs and opportunities and ways that we can even have more vouchers to support those in our community who are in need. So we're going to continue pushing.
I apologize in advance to any Metro Council members who may be in the room, but here's the question. My clients who are affordable housing developers have had project after project shot down at the whim of the council person in the district of the project. How do we help to push good projects through and not let them die at the hands of one individual?
We need more affordable housing in all neighborhoods, not just in other people's neighborhoods. I'm hopeful that everyone, including my friends on Metro Council, use that as their guiding mantra when they're looking to solve a community-wide problem.
How are affordable housing locations chosen? And what neighborhoods do you look at, and what's the process for that?
Again, let's be clear. Every neighborhood in our city, all 26 Metro Council districts, all 80 or 90 neighborhoods that we have across our city, need a wide variety of types of housing to have a vibrant neighborhood that's going to thrive over the test of time. So the city is not choosing affordable housing locations. Folks that are building housing are choosing that themselves. Nonprofit organizations, developers, public-private partnerships, agencies like Louisville Metro Housing, HPI, New Directions. Others are choosing sites that they think will work because there is a need in the market. One thing that's not happening in our city, housing is not being built and staying empty. When a new housing unit of any sort opens up right now in Louisville, it's snapped right up. There is a huge need. We can go back to where we started from. There is a huge need for housing in our city. Let's support our city. Let's think about the future. And I'll tell you, Bullitt County, Shelby County, Oldham County, E-Town, they're all building housing. Do we want Louisville to be a suburb to Bardstown, Kentucky? That's what's going to happen if we don't support and acknowledge that we need more housing of all type in every part of our city. And so we're supporting the housing everywhere, regardless of where it's being built. Of course, when you're building housing, we want it to be of good quality. We want it to fit in with the neighborhood. We want it to have services that can support the type of housing that it is. All of that is important and needs to be vetted through the zoning and planning process, and it is. But we should be asking people to develop more housing in our city, not putting roadblocks in the way to make it more difficult, so that our own local developers here, nonprofit and for-profit, are telling me on a weekly basis, I'm doing this project in another city because it's just easier to do business there. We should never hear that from anyone, particularly not locally based businesses that can help be part of the solution.
And I'll jump in here, Mayor, to your point, you were discussing the need for housing across Louisville, Jefferson County. Is there any collaboration ongoing with the many independent cities that we have with respect to whether there's any partnership? We talked a little bit about development codes. Those wouldn't apply necessarily. Any appetite to adopt those?
As a matter of fact, we just had a Zoom call at 8 a.m. Monday morning with a few of the mayors from some of the home rule cities in Jefferson County that are here on this exact topic. We are working to collaborate as best as we can with all of the home rule cities throughout Jefferson County. This is a topic. I learned something new on that call, as I do every time that we get together, about some of the history and the unique things in Louisville compared to other parts of the city. But we're working to collaborate as best as we can, because some cities have their own planning and zoning control for their cities within Jefferson County. Others rely on Louisville Metro government. And so we're looking to be good partners with all of them.
Yeah, thank you. Lawrence?
There's another aspect of this. Venture capital and other companies are buying entry-level houses in desirable areas with full cash offers, removing them from the housing stock from those wanting to buy their first home. How can we stop or reduce this from happening in our community?
Yeah, that's a tough one, to stop individual purchases. What we can do is we can continue to build more housing to meet every need. There's demand for tenants of those homes. There's demand for more single-family homes. There's demand for apartments in the South End, the West End, the East End, and Central Louisville. There's demand for duplexes and fourplexes. There are demands for patio homes. There is demand for everything. Let's build more. Let's grow as a city. Let's not move backwards.
You have mentioned a couple programs are more innovative in nature about how to address housing, and there is a question about, are any other cities that you see have examples of best practices that you can maybe think about bringing to Louisville? For example, is there any possibility of partnering with home builders to adopt blocks of vacant or abandoned homes to remodel for affordable housing, and any other examples like that?
Yeah, so a few of them I've touched on. I've mentioned vacant abandoned properties, one of our strategies for that. If folks, that's a challenging business because it's not, the construction is scattered. It's not all in one site. So here are a couple things that we're doing. One is on modular housing, a new way to build homes of great quality that can be done quicker to the same quality level, any type of architectural style that you want. So we're working with folks that are building homes in that way, particularly in vacant abandoned properties. We just announced a few months ago that we located in Louisville, MMY, which is a British company that their first U.S. operations is going to be right here in Louisville in the Parkland neighborhood to manufacture modular housing. Hopefully, much of that will stay here in Louisville as part of the solution. We're also, some of the other cities are doing things what I talked about. They've already enacted these middle housing regulations that promote density of a certain level and certain scale within residential neighborhoods. Some cities are removing parking requirements in different types of areas. Minneapolis is leading the charge in this area. This county in Maryland, I'm drawing a blank on.
Montgomery?
Montgomery County is also, other cities and counties are doing these things, and it's working. And you know, one of the things that happens when you build more housing, housing prices don't rise as fast. It makes all housing more affordable for individuals. That's also a good thing, as one of our competitive advantages is to be an affordable place to live. And so that also helps with that as well for people that are struggling to make ends meet because they're living in a location right now where the cost of living is going up.
Mayor, you mentioned needing to have dense housing in all parts of the community. That requires transportation. Given the problems at TARC, how do you address that issue?
So that is also, there are a lot of similarities between challenges that LMHA has been facing and challenges that TARC has been facing. The challenges that we're seeing right now with TARC are the result of decades of decisions that have brought us to this point. Combined with changing work habits that happened through COVID, ridership is down significantly. It's grown a little bit, but it's about 5 million rides a year. So if you ride to and from work each way and you take 2 buses each way, you are 4 of those 5 million rides. So it's not 5 million people, but it's probably on any given day, roughly only about 5,000 people are riding TARC. Now, those are 5,000 people who, just like the residents of LMHA who rely on an LMHA for their home, these individuals rely on TARC for their transportation to get to work, to get to a doctor's appointment, to get to the grocery, to go see a family member. And so we owe an obligation to those individuals. But I aspire for our public transportation to be much more than that. We should aspire to have great public transportation that everybody wants to use, because it's efficient, because it's cost effective, because it's good for the environment, because it gets you where you want to be when you want to get there in a timely fashion and on the time that the schedule says it's going to get you there. That's what we need to aspire to. So we have new leadership at TARC as well right now. We are working diligently on several things at TARC. One is notwithstanding the and also I should add that 25% of TARC's $110 million budget, that hole has been plugged for the past several years by one-time American Rescue Plan funding. That is going to zero. So just think about any organization that you operate. If 25% of your revenue vanished, that's what we're dealing with at TARC right now. So some tough choices have to be made, and I'm proud that the board has proposed a budget to deal with the reality, just as Elizabeth and her board is dealing with the reality of LMHA and being very transparent with the community about what the challenges are. In terms of the solution, a few things. Right now, there is a new routing study that's taking place to look at how has our city changed over the past many years. Where do people live? Where do they need to go? The people who need TARC the most, et cetera. Looking at all different criteria to come back with proposed routes that we think may better serve the city. By the end of this year, we should have a draft. By February of next year, we should have some proposals on that as well. Microtransit. If we're focused on the main corridors in our city, as I mentioned earlier, where we want to build density and have great commercial activity, Dixie Highway, Bardstown Road, Taylorsville, Poplar Level, Preston, and the list goes on, that should be where you have great, reliable, incredibly timely public transportation services, in addition to places like UPS, GE, and Ford that have large amounts of workers on a regular shift that we can support. But not everybody lives on those main thoroughfares. So what some cities, you talked about, you had a question about innovations. Some cities are now using microtransit, basically much smaller vans, almost like an Uber system, where if you live a mile away from your nearest bus stop, you can have somebody pick you up to bring you to the thoroughfare, and then you'll take the bus the rest of the way. That's something else that we need to look at. And the third thing that we're looking at right now that we're very focused on trying to help is to help our friends at JCPS address their transportation challenges. As I'm sure everyone in this room knows, right now JCPS has 575 bus routes every day. They have 500 bus drivers that show up to work every day. That's a big part of why some kids in our district have not once this entire year heard the morning announcements at their school. We want people in our community to continue to be able to go to magnet schools, to go to the academies of Louisville, regardless of where they live. TARC is faced with these challenging budget realities. As opposed to laying off bus drivers at TARC, we have an opportunity to help support the families of our city and help JCPS preserve the current choice for magnet schools and academies that it has. And so over the past 10 days, we have been working very collaboratively. I've engaged TARC leadership, JCPS leadership, union leadership from both TARC and JCPS, community members, Metro Council leaders, and we've all been gathering, working collaboratively to see if there's a solution here where there's a win-win opportunity so that TARC drivers don't have to be laid off and Jefferson County public school families continue to have their same options that they currently have. I'm cautiously optimistic. Stay tuned.
What are programs in place to ensure accessible housing for people with disabilities, wheelchair users, walkers, vision impaired?
Yeah, so almost all new housing that's being built, especially if it has federal subsidies, has to meet ADA requirements. So the programs that we support, the projects that we support have accessible units and have accessible entrances. So that's just something that we do as part of building new housing these days. And that's smart because it's better to build it accessibly on the front end than retrofit accessibly, though you can do that for sure. There were, over the years, programs through HUD that focused on specific kinds of housing needs that aren't really fully funded anymore. So what's having to fill the gaps in that is the pots of money that everybody's kind of fighting over. The low-income housing tax credit program, private activity tax exempt bonds, and Section 8 vouchers. Like those are kind of the bread and butter for how you finance any kind of housing. So I'm putting in a plug. We need more of all of those resources because we need more accessible housing. We need more of all the kinds of housing that the mayor mentioned. And the pots, or the number of pots is dwindling for what we have to build with. So we have to grow the pots that are left. And there's legislation on the table now. The U.S. Senate could vote right now to pass a tax package that would increase the amount of private activity tax exempt bonds that we all have to work with. That would really help our situation at Dosker Manor, Parkway Place, Avenue Plaza, et cetera. So I'm not lobbying, I'm just educating you that these things are out there on the table. Every year, or every 2 years, every new session of Congress, there's an affordable housing tax credit bill that's introduced, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, and that would dramatically increase all the kinds of tax credits that we need, and it would allow us more flexibility and put more equity into those projects. And every year, we should all be fighting for a larger HUD budget that allows for more Section 8 vouchers. So that's my plug.
And there's also some other southern states, Republican-dominated states that recently have enacted state affordable housing tax credits. Yep. We're advocating for that at the state level as well. That's one of the things that I was referring to earlier that we're hoping our General Assembly may enact in a future session.
That's great. That's perfect. All the levels, all the levels.
Lawrence, I think we have time for one more question.
All right. The questioner asked, this is the next one I was going to ask. Questioner asks, crossings at Mill Creek, a new apartment complex at Manslick and Bluegrass, is about half empty. Yet trying to contact people to lease the apartment is difficult. What are you doing to try to smooth the process for people seeking to lease?
That's on me, and that's on me and the partners that we're working with. But I know that group, the developer and the property manager, are working really hard to fill those units as quickly as possible, and we also need those units filled. We have to meet a certain requirement for HUD. That we're serving the same number of families now that we did in 1999 when we got that cool designation that I mentioned. So if we have units that we're supporting through project-based vouchers or any kind of our resources, if they're sitting empty, that's not helping us hit our numbers. And then when we have to do swings of residents to make substantial repairs, we can't afford to leave units empty. So if folks in this room, whoever wrote that question, wants to talk about ideas for how to smooth the process, but we're aware of some of the issues and working on that for sure. When we have units, we got to fill them. We need people that need housing. We got to meet our numbers. The investors need their return. Everybody needs it. We just got to move faster.
But before we get the hook for time here, I just want to end by saying thank you. I know there are so many people in this room that are working on this challenge, that are working on solutions to this challenge in one way, shape, or form. We've got folks like Frank and Paula Harshaw that have done amazing work in the Parkland neighborhood, a neighborhood that's been overlooked for generations, that are now bringing new housing to neighborhoods like Parkland. Everyone here, everyone in our city can play a role in helping support this, whether you're on the board of a nonprofit that can be an affordable housing developer, or whether you're a developer yourself, or whether you just call a member of Metro Council to encourage them to support some of the initiatives that we're talking about so that we can have more housing across our entire city. Everyone can help us solve this problem. This will help provide a foundation for our entire city to grow, to have a more vibrant future. And so I just want to thank you all for coming today and encourage you to help us make real, meaningful, measurable progress on this very important issue. Thank you all very much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Greenberg and Elizabeth. We so appreciate you joining the forum as always. Stay tuned for our announcement for our next program. We are going to be back on our regular schedule next month. So Wednesday, May 8th, we'll be back here at Vincenzo's, and you can register online at thelouisvilleforum.org. One more round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you.